Up off the bench.
No. We got complaints. This isn't a hangout spot.
It's a public bench.
I'm a customer, and I'm disabled.
I'm waiting for the bakery truck.
Don't argue with me. Show ID and drop the stick or you're going in cuffs.
That's my cane. Touch it and you're assaulting a disabled veteran on camera. Think before.
Officer Kyle Vance had been patrolling the streets of Sunnyvale for a little over 4 years, long enough to develop a swagger, but not long enough to cultivate wisdom. He was 29 years old, fit, aggressive, and operated under the dangerous delusion that his badge granted him immunity from consequences. He was the type of officer who referred to citizens as civilians with a sneer, believing that authority was something you took, not something you earned. On a bright Tuesday morning in October, Vance made a decision that would not only end his career in disgrace, but would force the city to write a check for $1.6 million. He walked into a situation armed with arrogance and bias, completely unaware that the man he was about to humiliate had given more to his country than Vance could ever comprehend. Before we get into the details of this infuriating encounter, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe that respect is a two-way street, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We bring you these stories because the truth matters, and accountability is the only way forward. The Sunnyvale Farmers Market is a local institution. Located in the heart of the historic district, it's an open-air gathering place that operates every Tuesday and Saturday. It's the kind of place where neighbors catch up, where the smell of fresh kettle corn hangs in the air, and where the community feels safe. The market is lined with white tents selling organic produce, artisanal jams, and fresh-baked goods. It was 10:15 a.m. The sun was high and warm, and the aisles were bustling with retirees, stay-at-home parents, and professionals taking a late morning break. It was a picture-perfect American morning until the dispatch radio crackled in Vance's patrol car. He was parked 2 blocks away, scrolling through his phone, bored and looking for something to do. The call came in as a suspicious individual refusing to leave the market area. The caller, a vendor named Brenda, sounded frantic, claiming she felt threatened by a man loitering near her booth. Vance didn't ask for details. He didn't ask if a crime had been committed. He heard suspicious and refusing to leave, and his mind immediately painted a picture. He put the car in gear and sped toward the market, already deciding how he was going to handle the situation. He didn't plan to investigate. He planned to dominate. In his 4 years on the force, Vance had racked up 6 complaints for discourtesy and 2 for excessive use of force. Both force complaints were dismissed by Internal Affairs as within policy, reinforcing his belief that he was untouchable. He parked his cruiser illegally in a loading zone right at the market's entrance, the lights flashing unnecessarily against the bright morning sun. He stepped out, adjusting his duty belt, his sunglasses hiding eyes that were scanning for a target. He wasn't looking for a problem to solve. He was looking for a person to break. He marched past the market manager, who tried to flag him down to explain the situation, and headed straight for the location Brenda had described. He saw the subject sitting on a bench, and in Vance's mind the narrative was confirmed. He saw a threat. The city of Sunnyvale was about to pay dearly for his lack of judgment. Major Elias Thorne, U.S. Army retired, was not a man who looked for trouble. At 58 years old, he had seen enough conflict to last 10 lifetimes. He had served his country for 28 years, starting as an enlisted infantryman and rising through the ranks to retire as a field-grade officer. He had led men in Panama, the Balkans, and finally Afghanistan. It was in the Kandahar province 7 years ago that his career in the field ended. An improvised explosive device. IED had detonated under his convoy vehicle. The blast had taken the hearing in his left ear and shattered his right leg. Surgeons had saved the leg barely, but the damage was permanent. Elias walked with a heavy limp and required the use of a sturdy hand-carved oak cane to get around. The cane wasn't a prop. It was a necessity, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for the flag he loved. Despite the pain that flared up on humid days, Elias carried himself with an upright, rigid posture that screamed military discipline. He kept his hair high and tight, his face clean-shaven, and his clothes immaculate. That Tuesday, Elias was dressed in a crisp navy blue polo shirt, khaki slacks pressed with a military crease, and polished leather loafers. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't a vagrant. He was a homeowner who lived 3 miles away in a subdivision he had chosen for its quiet streets. He had come to the market for 2 things: heirloom tomatoes for a salad and a loaf of sourdough bread from the bakery stand that only arrived after 10 a.m. He had purchased his tomatoes and placed them in a canvas tote bag. The bakery truck was late, so Elias had done what any reasonable person with a shattered leg would do. He found a bench and sat down. The bench was public property situated near a stall selling artisanal jams. Elias checked his watch, a heavy tactical timepiece he'd worn for 2 decades, and rested his hands on the head of his oak cane. He closed his eyes for a moment, enjoying the warmth of the sun on his face, listening to the hum of the market. To anyone paying attention, Elias Thorne looked exactly like what he was: a dignified, aging warrior enjoying a quiet morning. He was a man of immense patience and integrity. He was a deacon at his church and a volunteer at the local VA hospital, helping young soldiers navigate the bureaucracy of benefits. He believed in order in law and in the fundamental goodness of his community. He had no idea that simply sitting on a bench while black would be enough to strip him of that dignity in the eyes of the law. He sat there, a Purple Heart recipient, a Bronze Star holder, waiting for bread, while a storm named Officer Vance was barreling toward him. Brenda Miller was 38 years old and had been selling her homemade jams at the Sunnyvale Farmers Market for 3 seasons. She considered herself the self-appointed guardian of the market's atmosphere. She was the type of person who monitored the parking lot for cars that didn't look like they belonged and kept the non-emergency police line on speed dial. Her stall, Brenda's Berry Best, was located right next to the public bench where Major Thorne was sitting. Brenda had been watching Elias for 10 minutes. In her mind, his presence was a disruption. He hadn't bought anything from her. He was just sitting there. To Brenda, a large black man sitting still was not a customer. He was a potential problem. She saw him check his watch and interpreted it as him timing the security patrols. She saw him close his eyes and interpreted it as him being under the influence of something. She saw the canvas tote bag at his feet and wondered if he was using it to steal merchandise. Her bias was a quiet, corrosive thing. She didn't use slurs. She used words like uncomfortable, safety, and loitering. She convinced herself that her unease was based on intuition rather than prejudice. He's driving away customers. She muttered to herself, though the market was bustling and no one else seemed to notice the man on the bench. In fact, a young couple had just walked past him, and Elias had politely pulled his legs in to let them pass. Brenda didn't see the courtesy. She only saw the intrusion. After 15 minutes, Brenda decided she had endured enough. She didn't speak to Elias. She didn't ask if he needed help or if he was waiting for someone. She stepped behind her display of strawberry preserves, pulled out her cell phone, and dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? I'm at the farmers market on Main, Brenda said, her voice dropping to a whisper, creating a drama that didn't exist. There's a man here who is refusing to leave. He's been loitering right in front of my stand for 20 minutes. He's making me and my customers very uncomfortable. Is he aggressive, ma'am? Has he threatened anyone? The dispatcher asked. He's glaring at people. Brenda lied, watching Elias looking at the bakery stand down the row. And he has a large stick or club with him. I'm worried he might use it. He just doesn't look like he belongs here. Please send someone before something happens. We have an officer in the area, the dispatcher said. Brenda hung up, feeling a surge of self-righteous satisfaction. She believed she was protecting the community. She believed she was doing the right thing. She looked at Elias, who was now checking his phone, unaware that his mere existence in that space had just been criminalized. Brenda turned back to a customer, a smile plastering her face, completely disconnected from the devastation she had just set in motion. She wanted him gone. She had no idea that her call would expose the ugly underbelly of the town's policing and cost the taxpayers millions. Officer Vance didn't walk through the crowd. He cut through it. His presence was kinetic and aggressive. People stepped out of his way, conversations stopping as he passed. He wasn't scanning the crowd for safety. He was locked onto the coordinates Brenda had given. He saw the bench. He saw the black man. He saw the club. Elias Thorne was responding to a text message from his wife asking if he wanted to pick up dinner on the way home when a shadow fell over him. He looked up expecting perhaps a neighbor or the baker. Instead, he found Officer Kyle Vance towering over him, hand resting casually but menacingly near his holstered firearm. "You need to move along, partner," Vance said. It wasn't a request. It was a command delivered with the casual disrespect Vance reserved for people he deemed lesser. Elias blinked his mind, processing the tone. He didn't stand up immediately. His leg was stiff and sudden movements were painful. He slowly lowered his phone to his lap and met the officer's gaze with the steady, steel-eyed look of a man who had stared down warlords. "Excuse me, officer," Elias said, his voice deep and calm, the voice of a man accustomed to giving orders, not receiving them from children in uniform. "I said, time to go," Vance snapped, stepping closer, invading Elias's personal space. "We got complaints. You're loitering. This is a market for paying customers, not a homeless shelter." The insult hung in the air. Elias felt a flash of anger, but he tamped it down instantly. Discipline. Always discipline. "I am a paying customer, officer," Elias said, gesturing to the tote bag at his feet. "I've purchased produce, and I am waiting for the bakery stand to open. I am sitting on a public bench." "I don't see any receipt," Vance said, looking at the bag with disdain. "And the manager wants you gone. So you can walk away, or I can help you walk away." Elias looked past Vance and saw Brenda watching from her stall, her arms crossed, a look of vindication on her face. He understood immediately. "I have done nothing wrong," Elias said, shifting his weight. "I have a right to be here. I am a citizen of this town, and I am resting my leg. If there is a specific crime I am suspected of, I'd like to know what it is." Vance bristled. He hated jailhouse lawyers. He hated when people knew their rights. He expected fear, and when he got confidence instead, he interpreted it as resistance. "You want to get smart?" Vance's voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby shoppers. "I'm giving you a lawful order. Disperse." "A lawful order must be based on a law," Elias corrected him gently but firmly. "Sitting on a public bench in a public park during operating hours is not a crime. I am not blocking the path. I am not disturbing the peace. I am simply existing." Vance's face flushed red. He was losing control of the interaction, and his ego couldn't handle the public defiance. He decided right then that he didn't care about the law. He cared about winning. "Let me see your ID," Vance demanded, extending his hand. Elias sat perfectly still. He knew the law better than Vance did. He knew that in this state this was a Terry stop situation. An officer needed reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime to demand identification. Being black on a bench didn't qualify. "Officer," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. "I am not required to identify myself unless I am being detained for a crime. Am I being detained?" "You're being detained for trespassing," Vance lied. It was a weak pretext. It was a public park. "You cannot trespass in a public park unless you have been formally trespassed by the authority having jurisdiction," Elias said. "Has the Parks Department asked me to leave?" Vance had had enough. He stepped back and keyed his radio, though he didn't speak into it. It was a theater of intimidation. "Stand up," Vance barked. "Now, hands where I can see them." Elias sighed. He knew where this was going. He knew that any sudden move would be interpreted as a threat. "I'm going to stand up." Elias announced clearly for the benefit of the people who were now stopping to watch. "I have a disability. I need to use my cane to stand. I am reaching for my cane." Elias moved his right hand slowly toward the oak cane resting against the bench. "Drop the weapon," Vance shouted, jumping back and drawing his taser. The crowd gasped. A woman screamed. "It is a cane, officer," Elias said, freezing his hand. "I am a disabled veteran. I cannot stand without it." "I said don't touch it," Vance yelled. He was adrenaline dumping now, his training failing him completely. He saw a large man reaching for a heavy object. He didn't hear veteran. He didn't hear disability. He only heard his own panic. "Get on the ground. Do it now." "I physically cannot get on the ground easily," Elias said, his voice straining to remain calm. "If you force me down, you will injure me. I am a retired field-grade officer of the United States Army. You are making a mistake, son. Take a breath." Calling him son was the final straw for Officer Vance. He holstered the taser and lunged forward. He wasn't going to wait for compliance. He was going to enforce it. "I told you what to do," Vance grunted. Elias didn't fight back. He had the training to dismantle the young officer in seconds, but he knew that if he raised a hand, he would be shot. He chose survival. He chose to let the injustice happen so he could fight it later in a courtroom. Vance kicked the oak cane away. It clattered loudly across the pavement, spinning out of reach. Without his support, Elias's injured leg buckled. He instinctively reached out to the bench to catch himself, but Vance was already on him. The officer grabbed Elias by the shoulder and the back of his polo shirt, using his momentum to hurl the older man toward the ground. Elias hit the concrete hard. His glasses flew off. A sharp, blinding pain shot up his right leg as the metal pins and reconstructed bone jarred against the pavement. He groaned a deep, guttural sound of agony. "Stop resisting," Vance screamed, dropping his knee onto the small of Elias's back, driving the air from his lungs. "I am not resisting." Elias wheezed, his cheek pressed against the dirty asphalt. "I am in pain. My leg." "Hands behind your back." Vance grabbed Elias's left wrist and wrenched it up toward his shoulder blades with unnecessary force. By now, a crowd of 20 or 30 people had formed a circle. Phones were out. The cameras were rolling. "He didn't do anything," a man in a baseball cap shouted from the crowd. "He was just sitting there." "That's a cane, you idiot, not a weapon," another woman yelled. Vance ignored them. He was in the tunnel now. He grabbed Elias's other hand and slapped the handcuffs on, ratcheting them tight. Too tight. The metal bit into the skin of Elias's wrists. "Officer," Elias said, his voice tight with pain but surprisingly steady. "You are arresting Major Elias Thorne, U.S. Army, retired. I have a reconstructed right leg and shrapnel in my lower back. You are currently injuring a disabled veteran. I want this documented." "Shut up," Vance panted, pulling Elias up. Because Elias couldn't use his leg, he was dead weight. Vance had to drag him, making it look like Elias was refusing to walk. "He can't walk. Look at his leg." The crowd was getting hostile now. "Get his cane." Vance didn't get the cane. He left it lying on the ground. He dragged Elias across the pavement to the patrol car, opened the back door, and shoved the decorated officer inside like a sack of garbage. Elias had to contort his stiff leg to fit, grimacing in silence. As Vance slammed the door, he looked back at the crowd. He saw the phones. He saw the anger. For a split second, doubt crept in. But he pushed it down. He was the law. The law was always right. He walked back, picked up the cane, and threw it in the trunk. Then he got in the driver's seat and peeled away, leaving the market in stunned silence. The drive to the precinct was short and silent. Elias sat in the back, eyes closed, regulating his breathing to manage the pain radiating from his leg. He was memorizing everything. The time, the speed, the officer's badge number 492, the lack of seatbelt, the aggressive braking. He was building his case file in his head. When they arrived at the station, Vance pulled Elias out of the car. Elias stumbled, his leg useless without the cane. Vance had to practically carry him to the booking desk. Sergeant Miller was the watch commander that day. He was 55 years old, a career cop who believed in community policing and common sense, two things that were absent from this arrest. He looked up from his paperwork and saw Vance dragging a well-dressed, gray-haired black man into the holding area. Miller noticed the quality of the man's clothes. He noticed the military haircut. He noticed the way the man held his head up despite being manhandled. "Vance, what do we have here?" Miller asked, coming around the desk. "Trespassing, resisting failure to ID." Vance recited the script. "Suspect refused to leave the farmers market. Got aggressive. Had a weapon." "A weapon?" Miller looked at Elias. "You searched him. He had a club. It's in the trunk." "It is a cane sergeant." Elias spoke up. His voice filled the room. "I am Major Elias Thorne. I am a Purple Heart recipient. That officer kicked my medical device away and assaulted me." Miller froze. He looked at Vance, then back at Elias. "Uncuff him. Now." "Sarge, he was—" "I said uncuff him," Miller roared. Vance fumbled with the keys and removed the cuffs. Elias rubbed his wrists, which were bleeding slightly. "Major," Miller said, his tone shifting to respectful urgency. "Do you have identification?" "In my back pocket," Elias said. "Wallet." Miller gestured for permission, then gently removed the leather wallet. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the blue retiree's ID card. Major Elias Thorne, USA, retired. Behind it was a card identifying him as a Purple Heart recipient, granting him priority access to VA services. Miller looked at the ID. Then he looked at Vance. The look was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You arrested a field-grade officer for a cane." Miller whispered the silence in the room heavy. "He refused to ID," Vance stammered. "He was acting suspicious. He's a 58-year-old disabled veteran buying vegetables." Miller slammed the wallet down on the counter. "Did you verify the complaint? Did you ask for a supervisor?" Vance had no answer. Miller turned to Elias. "Major, I need to get you a chair. Do you need a medic?" "My leg is likely re-injured," Elias said calmly. "I need my cane. And I want to file a formal criminal complaint against this officer for assault and battery." "Get his cane, Vance," Miller ordered. "And then give me your badge and gun. You're done for the day. You might be done forever." Vance walked out to the car, his legs feeling heavy. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold pit of dread. He realized finally that he wasn't the predator. He was the prey, and he had just walked into a trap of his own making. The fallout was swift and catastrophic for the city of Sunnyvale. The video footage from the bystanders hit the internet before Elias was even released from the hospital, where he was treated for a hairline fracture in his previously reconstructed tibia. The image of a 29-year-old officer kicking a cane away from a 58-year-old black veteran went viral globally. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The dignity of the major versus the thuggishness of the officer. The headlines wrote themselves. "Hero handcuffed. Purple Heart profiling." The city attorney took one look at the police body cam footage, which confirmed everything Elias and the witnesses said, and told the mayor to settle immediately. There was no defense. Vance had violated Fourth Amendment rights Americans with Disabilities Act protections and department policy. If this went to a federal jury, they wouldn't just award millions. They would dismantle the department. The settlement was agreed upon in 3 weeks, $1.6 million, to Major Elias Thorne. Officer Kyle Vance was fired 6 days after the incident. The chief of police didn't just fire him. He submitted his name to the state decertification board, ensuring Vance would never wear a badge in any state again. Vance tried to fight it through the union, but even the union wouldn't touch this. He was left unemployed, disgraced, and facing a potential civil rights lawsuit of his own. Brenda Miller, the vendor who made the call, faced her own reckoning. The release of the 911 tape revealed her lies. The community boycotted her stand. The Farmers Market Board permanently revoked her vendor license for violating their code of conduct regarding harassment. She lost her business because she couldn't stand the sight of a black man sitting on a bench. But money and firings don't fix the leg. Major Thorne spent 6 months in physical therapy to regain the mobility he lost that day. He never went back to that farmer's market. We often talk about supporting the troops in this country. We put bumper stickers on our cars and wave flags on holidays. But true respect isn't a slogan. It's how we treat people when they aren't in uniform. It's acknowledging that a man's dignity shouldn't depend on his ability to produce an ID card on command. Major Thorne fought for freedom abroad only to have it stolen from him at home by a man who swore to protect him. Systemic bias doesn't always look like a burning cross. Sometimes it looks like a nervous vendor and an arrogant cop on a sunny Tuesday morning. It looks like the assumption that a black man resting is a black man loitering. What do you think? Should officers be personally liable for settlements when they violate civil rights, or should the taxpayers foot the bill? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and please share this story. We have to keep shining a light on these injustices until the shadow of bias is gone for good.